Hey everyone, just want to give you a quick heads up. You might notice that this is an audio only episode, which we haven't done in like several years. Well, that is because we had some video issues when we were recording part 2 and part 3 of the tier list. So the next 2 episodes of the podcast are going to be audio only episodes. So we're just going to have a screen up with the thumbnail on YouTube, and on Spotify it's just going to be an audio file. So a little bit of an old school podcast feel going on today, but we greatly appreciate everybody and hope you enjoy this episode.
Today's episode of the Mind Sculptors podcast is brought to you by TCG Player, your source for all your trading card game needs. Please consider using our link in the description for your next purchase, as it helps support the continued refinement of our show. This episode is also made possible through the gracious support of our Patreon members. If you wish to join this esteemed group, simply visit patreon.com/The Mind Sculptors and become part of the SCULPTY family today. And of course, if you prefer a simpler gesture, we invite you to subscribe, leave a like and comment on YouTube, or leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts as a most fitting offering to the ever-watchful algorithm Jesus.
I went and changed my my shirt to the Ohio State jersey because this is in anticipation of their hopeful victory over Tennessee and then further victory over Oregon by the time this is done.
And I am breaking the illusion and wearing the same shirt because this is the same day.
If they lose this weekend to Tennessee, this is going to look real goofy in 2 weeks.
Rip.
Whatever, we're going for it. Welcome everybody to the Mind Sculptor podcast. I'm Cal.
And I am Ian.
We are continuing our definitive cEDH tier list. This is the tier list. If you want any other tier list, they aren't the definitive tier list. This is the best one, the only one that you need for your life in cEDH.
We did some math.
We did some thinking and thonking. And we communed with the Oracle, all that stuff.
And then the Oracle was like, please, it's my day off.
Guys, come on. I have a tight schedule. If you want to support the podcast, you can go over to patreon.com/the Mind Sculptors. And also you can leave a like and comment here on YouTube or Spotify. And make sure you follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and subscribe to us here on YouTube. It helps us out so much as an offering to the illustrious algorithm Jesus.
Subscribe
Hallowed be his name. So let's get into this. We've got 14 more to go here.
Yeah.
And we're starting off here with Esper, and let's start off with the one that you and I have kind of always said is like in a vacuum, the best partner pairing, right? And that's Malcolm Timna. This is the commander pairing that on paper should be the best partner pairing.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it not in a vacuum?
Yes, when you leave the vacuum, and once again, reminder that as we go through these with the tier list, this is based on the average Joe Schmo and the Crab Shack meta, and how they would play the deck, right? And once again, this is not the worst cEDH player; this is the average cEDH player, right? So average cEDH player, average Joe Schmo looking, just picking up a deck and sending it,
I really love that we have made Crab Shack meta mean the average meta.
yeah. If the average cEDH player plays in a Crab Shack, I don't know what to tell you. But if I am one of the Crab Shack, I think that this deck is just the definition of a B tier deck, right? I often have criticisms with this list of how the results don't feel like it matches the quality of the deck list. I do think it does have some intricacies that make it a little bit harder. I think it's got a little bit of the Kinnan problem because you really just you sort of have the world at your fingertips, except for winning the game, right? Winning the game is always, always, always the
You know what
hardest
could help
part.
that?
Hmm.
Not playing Doomsday.
Well, yes, correct. Winning the game is the hardest part of this archetype, and so finding ways to win that are effective, explosive, etc., is definitely the way to go about it. It's just gonna be a little tough, right? I mean, it's as I mentioned before, like play patterns of just I'm gonna vamp tutor for Grand Abolisher, right? Lock it up, making sure it's nice and clean, all that kind of stuff. You have those tools at your disposal. You have mana. You have I mean, you arguably make mana better than Blue Farm does nowadays because they lost their
Yeah.
dock sides, right? So arguably, this should be one of the most efficient partner pairings, period,
This
right?
should be an
But
S tier deck, honestly.
it feels like it should be, yeah. But I do think like not being able to win without a board state is definitely a thing that would probably always keep in the A tier at the very least. But
Hmm.
like this should be doing better than it is. It feels like,
Yeah.
and therefore it's got to stay in this kind of B tier for me for the for the sake of this video, right?
I just feel like I
Um,
haven't seen any innovation out of Malcolm Timna in like years. Like I,
yeah,
I, I
I see a
honestly
lot of
feel like
people.
it has been
Yeah,
so long since I've seen any like big, you
yeah,
know,
changes.
shifts to
Sure,
the
sure.
deck.
Yeah, and I think it's very easy to sort of lean back on like some of the stuff that has been proven to work, but it definitely feels like I mean, it is just Esper good stuff at the end of the day, right? Like it's very hard to have
Yeah.
like an insane innovation with it, right? But um as I mentioned, like it's a solid deck. Like pick it up if you want to just play solid Magic and have your commanders sort of make the early game very easy for you, right? Like it's one
Yeah.
of those decks where like you don't worry about mulliganing, right? As much because turn one Malcolm's, turn one little pirate that turns into a turn two Malcolm, all that shit's great. And it just depends on what you then use those resources to do as the game progresses, you know?
Hmm. Yeah. I like this deck a lot. I also have it in B tier. I feel like on paper it should be like it should be better than like a Tivit, right? Um, but I feel like when rubber hits the road, it just like doesn't get any traction, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like to use like a to continue with that metaphor, you have
Yep.
like some race cars or some like sports cars
Yeah.
where they're just too light, where they don't get enough traction, and so they just kind of like whip around corners and then can't really go too fast because of
Hmm.
that. And they end up losing to the heavier cars because they
Yeah.
are able to generate a little bit more traction and momentum. And I
Hmm.
think that might be a little bit of Malcolm Timna's problem. I think it might just be a little too lean to get the forward momentum that it needs to win a game.
Yeah.
I think it should have the sauce. I don't. Maybe I should spend some time working on Malcolm Timna because I feel like there's something there, and we just haven't quite hit it yet.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know. It feels like it's on the cusp of being great, and
Yeah.
instead continually like some of the stats I see for it when we do our power rankings is
Mhm.
like it performs awful for some reason, and it
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like shouldn't. And I think like if this was any other deck, right, we would have it much lower. But I think because we are aware of how good it can be potentially, like the
Yeah.
potential it has there, we're willing to give it the benefit of the doubt, right?
Hmm.
But
Yeah. That's fair.
that's where I have it here at
Yeah.
I have it here at B tier. Moving on down to Marnus Calgar.
Magmar Karamari.
This is a deck that is near and dear to your heart. I know. What are your thoughts on Marnius?
In the sense that I've never played it before, even one time. Yeah. It's
That's true, but this is a deck you like.
yes, it is a deck I have historically appreciated. I Yeah, it just feels like it's so close to greatness, and I've been seeing it do pretty well at the local level. There's a pilot here who's been putting up some pretty consistent top results in some of the smaller tournaments. So I definitely don't think like it's down and out by any means. I think
Hmm.
it's a very interesting uh commander. I like it more than Master of Keys, which I think is the easiest comparison,
Hmm.
right? Because people really like Master of Keys because it's this infinite mana outlet, which I totally get, but I think Marnius is a better infinite mana outlet because the grind game is way better than Master of Keys.
Yeah.
I think like the ability to just stick a Smothering Tithe and then land your commander and basically win over the next turn cycle, right? Is pretty insane, right? So I definitely think it has a higher potential than Master of Keys does, in which we will talk about a little bit later. I think if you're looking for Esper plus infinite mana, if you want Esper plus Bomberman, or maybe as Conceptor, I don't feel like that's the best thing to be doing in these colors, but
No.
like some people do. This is the place to put it. If you want
Right.
basically Esper with higher explosive potential, right? You don't want to wait like Tivit does. You don't want to wait like
Right.
Malcolm Timna does. You want to go a little bit faster with Esper and give up a little bit of the late game. This is the way to do it, you know?
Yeah. I agree with a lot of that. I think my biggest issue with it is I don't think that is the stuff that Esper does really well.
Mm,
Is kind of my issue with it. I think part of what elevates like a Tivit deck is that Tivit really just is all in on what Esper is all about. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And I think that is something that is an advantage. And I think the biggest issue I see with Marnius is every time I've ever played against it. Now, granted, this is as a Tivit player, so take this worth, for what it's worth. But every time I've played against it, it always feels like if it gets taken into a longer game,
Hmm.
it really struggles. And that's kind of been my experience against it.
Yeah.
And it kind of has a harder time like getting over the top. I don't know. I've never been able to pinpoint why, but that's kind of how it always feels.
Hmm.
Um,
I agree.
Whereas like a Master of Keys, I feel like I've seen be able to like get over the top in a longer game. And
Mm. Okay, that's
in
where you
Tivit
lost me.
obviously can. What'd you say?
I said I agreed with you, and that's where you lost me.
Okay. Um, I don't know. That's just been my experiences. I've seen
Yeah.
Master of Keys and Marnius. Now, granted, I think they're both really close. I think
Mm.
my like thought process on it is that like I have it here at C, is that like if you want to play like a Esper combo deck, I think they're both great options for that.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, you know, and I think God, I just have such a hard time with Marnius because it's very expensive. And I don't feel like the payoff you get for it is ever worth it.
Yes.
That's kind of how I always feel about it. Is it always just feels underwhelming to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and as I said, like, had I not been seeing it be successful at this local level, I think I maybe would be a little more critical of it, but I have
yeah,
seen it put in some decent work, so I'm more, inclined to believe in it than I maybe would have been historically, you know?
yeah, no, that's fair. Moving on, we were just talking about it. The Master of Keys, the
Mhm.
next Spur deck. This is a more recent deck. It's what, 2 sets ago now.
Did we say where we had them ranked?
I said I had it at C tier. Where do you have Marnius?
Marnius, I have at B, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I thought you said that, but I wasn't sure.
Yep.
Um, yeah, the Master Keys. This is a newer addition to the cEDH metagame. How do you feel about it?
Um, just everything slightly worse than I feel about Marnius calgar. I
Yeah.
think people really like the Master of Keys, and I get it. It's a cool design space. It's like, yeah, self mill, and then you can. I think people saw that one video, play to win, put out, where they like Tyler loop dress down over and over again, and everyone's like, "Fuck yeah, that thing! I want to do that."
Yeah.
Like, that is super sick. I just don't know that that is the most
Optimal way
common
of playing
case
it.
for the commander itself, right?
Right.
Like, I just don't know that that's always going to be how it works, right? Don't get me wrong, looping dress down turn after turn is very, very good, and there are synergies with the deck where like actually this is the one thing I will say, it has a very clean intuition pile with Abdel Adrian that I do
Hmm.
think is very real, right? Where you basically get Tiny Bones joins up, you get some sort of reanimate effect like an animate dead, and then you get Abdel Adrian. And basically, because you never get a pile that's wrong, because even if you get Abdel, you play Tiny Bones joins up out of your graveyard and you make yourself discard your Abdel Adrian.
Mm,
So basically, as long as you have 6 cards in graveyard and enough mana to cast everything, but you only need 3 mana to execute the
right.
loop.
Right.
So as long as you have 6 cards in graveyard, there is no downside to it. And I will say, if you get to the point where you can resolve that intuition pile, I think it's really cool and
Yeah.
really powerful. So I do have master keys at the C tier
Mhm.
personally, but I do think that is a very interesting aspect of the deck, and I kind of like the main appeal for me to be playing this deck in comparison to other decks that exist. Like having a 1 card intuition package is kind of nice.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally fair and valid. I also have it at C. I think that it is still getting figured out. And I think it has a lot of upward potential. I think I'm a little bit more like keen on it than you are. Just in that I feel like it operates in a very unique area, if that
Mhm,
makes sense.
mhm.
And so I think it has a lot of opportunities to be really good. We'll see. I like it for
Yeah,
what it is at a C tier, so I think it's
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
Moving on. I think people will be shocked to find out about our next one. This is Tivit, Seller of Secrets. Hey, Ian,
Yeah,
where do you have Tivit?
Tivit, I have at A tier. Tivit is really good right now. It's been putting up very good results. People have been playing it in different ways, and it's still putting up really good results.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is a very specific attack on the format, like kinda like the initial design that I threw out like a year and a half ago is attacking the format that it looks like we're playing right now, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, there were I've said it historically, there were other Tivits that existed in the format when I first made that deep run with Tivit, but like this was the one that like specifically hit that format really hard because Grafdigger's Cage and stuff like that was really powerful. And guess what?
Right.
And Curse Totem, like they're really powerful right now, right? So, yeah, Tivit looks really well positioned. It grinds really well. It breaks parity on board state really well in a meta that's full of Timna Thrasioses and a bunch of shit like that. So, like, if you can break parity on a bunch of board wipes and stuff like that, this is a really good time to be doing that. And
Yep.
Tivit does that very effectively, probably one of the best at doing that exact thing. So like Tivit's one of the A tier commanders that I think gets closest to like an A plus for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it really is just solid right now. Like I would not have said that post or pre-ban, right? But this is a very
Right.
different world for Tivit. Basically everything that could set Tivit up for success kind of happened.
On it, honestly, not having to worry about dockside. I also have it at A tier. Not having to worry about dockside lets it opens up the playbook so
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
because one of the things we always had to worry about when playing Tivit is the timing of when you play your Tivit. You don't want to slam it too fast. You don't
Yeah.
want to do this sort of thing because you don't want to accidentally feed a dockside and all those sorts
Mhm.
of things. Whereas now, you're still not really windmill slamming a Tivit, but you're okay to just like get it out there and start chipping away at people.
Yeah.
And that was a thing that in the previous meta we didn't feel comfortable doing. And that
Yeah.
is a huge advantage to
Yeah.
be able to do. And I think that's why you see so many different variations of Tivit now, because you have that freedom to kind of play it in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah.
And that is something that previously you had to play it pretty tight. And
Mhm.
it's not that way anymore. So, yeah, I think Tivit's in an amazing position right
Mhm.
now. I think the only reason I don't have it in like an S tier is that it is expensive,
Mhm.
which is a real downside.
Yeah.
And I think that it takes a lot of practice to get used to.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that it is, even in the hands of like an average player, going to do all right.
Yeah.
And that kind of sets it apart. So I have Tivit up here at A. I gotta say, one of the Tivit lists that was in your, the ZD whatever it was that you just did a
Big
breakdown
DD
on,
open breakdown. Yeah.
uh, had Winds of Abandon in it, and that just made my little heart smile. That's one of my favorite cards,
And
man.
Cal's heart grew 3 sizes that day.
Cal's opinion on Yuriko improved significantly because of that inclusion.
This is the bit that will transcend this tier list.
Moving on to our next commander. This is a classic one. This is
Mhm.
Derevi, Imperial Tactician. How do you feel about Derevi? This was one that when Nadu was in the format, you felt pretty good about.
No,
Um,
okay, here's the thing. I'm dropping the ankle weights on this one. Derevi never needed Nadu to be good. Derevi was always fucking good, and the deck got confused when Nadu was printed, and it became easy to do Bant Nadu, right? Like, it was just a weird Timna Thrasios that should have
Yeah.
been Timna Thras Nadu package.
Yeah.
Derevi never needed Nadu. It was just fun to call the deck Turducken, and you know what? I agree. That's awesome. That's rock and roll. Turducken is a very silly, cool name. Hell yeah. Derevi has always been good. It has just been the fact that it was built one way for like 6 fucking years, and then
Yeah.
partial Paris mulligans, which, by the way, if you don't know what that is, that's when commander mulligans used to be, you could put any number of cards back and then draw any number for your mulligans, which was fundamentally busted. So when you couldn't guarantee your turn 1 Trinisphere, Stacks Derevi became bad again. Then it was like 5 years of everyone being like, well, I can't resolve the turn 1 Trinisphere. Derevi's bad. I can't stasis lock because you need Derevi and a Sakashima to make a thing. And yes, I know Spellpod Derevi came out and it was innovative, but it still kind of did the same stuff at the same time. Shout out to those players though. And then flash forward to what, last Christmas, where I was like, hey, can we just do mid-range Derevi with a bunch of artifacts because it's the only way to survive Bowmasters? And then it started doing okay, and then it went down again, and then Turducken came out and everyone was like, hell yeah, so many birds in this one deck, Nadu triggers. It's still fine. The deck is still fine. I think it's just you have to be very comfortable with very bad combos, but at the same time, you play the same Bant grind that all the other decks play. You just now have this insanely resilient commander. Like, I was literally talking with people yesterday at the, or not, I guess 2 days ago, at my LGS for our like 20-person Jersey event, and I was like, "How many of you guys talking about Derevi right now are on Shorokai?" I'm like, and like a bunch of them were like, "Oh no, we cut it a while ago." And I was like, "I think it's one of the best cards in the entire deck, right?" And
No,
so
we cut the One Ring.
right. I don't think it's that bad, but genuinely, it's like I've gone on record saying I think Shorokai at times is better than the One Ring because the One Ring allows you to draw like 15 cards and then you can't do anything with it, which Shorokai makes bodies so you can actually use the mana, right?
Right.
And so like it's just, it is not easy to build it correctly, right?
Yeah.
Which is I think what's going to keep Derevi out of the A tier, and especially in this conversation where we're talking about the Crab Shack meta, where I think Derevi is insanely powerful. I don't think it ever needed Nadu. Nadu was very good at giving the deck a clear direction, right? That
Yeah.
anyone could pick up. Like Joe Schmo could pick up Derevi with Nadu inside and go, yeah, Derevi's kind of cool, but like I'm gonna Nadu breakfast,
Right.
right? I still think the deck is a very solid B tier if you're giving it to Joe Schmo. Like, it's a deck that is totally fine. You just can't look at a list, go, I'm going to pick this up with no context and play it. It is just not a deck where you can do that. You have to know why the cards are there.
Yeah.
Because in every Derevi list, there's like 30 fucking combos. And if you only know like Emil plus Cradle plus Derevi, then it's not going to be good. Because you have to know that like
Yeah.
there are this layers with this if you have this on board, which layers with this.
Derevi's like onions. They have layers.
Yes. Unironically, yeah, that. Like, if you understand why Chromatic Ori is arguably the best card in the deck, then you can understand why Derevi is good, right? I think genuinely that's the line there, you know? Like,
I think so much of it is, I think people have like brain rot from playing like Timna Crom a bunch because they're just like, we have my combo and then a bunch of good cards. And they think that like every deck is that way. And I think something, and you touched on this a little bit, is that, you know, you have to be okay with playing like bad combos, but I don't even know that they're bad combos. I think they're just super synergistic combos.
yes.
And
well, bad cards for synergistic combos is
yeah,
right? Like, yeah.
And I think you have to be okay with the synergy, and you have to be okay with like what you gain from that synergy. And I think that like if you're trying to just play good stuff to Ravi, why aren't you playing like, I don't know, a Bant Thrasios deck, right? Or just Timna Thrasios. And I think that like Derevi is at its best when it is leaning into the synergy. And, that is one of the things that I think is really strong. I think it's a solid B tier, just like you. I think that it is, listen, I don't understand cutting Shorekai. I think that's like maybe the second best card in the deck. And I think that there's a lot of stuff there where, we kind of talked about this a little bit with like how Yuriko pilots have some of that like get rog a bit thing where they've just stared at it so long that, they kind of like get in their head about it or
the
whatever.
Steam cards starts coming out the
Yeah.
ear. Like, yeah.
And I think Derevi has been around long enough where a lot of those devoted Derevi pilots have just stared at it for so long that, the kind of lost sight of everything else. That's Derevi here, B tier, good deck. Maybe play Shorekai. I don't know. Next commander here, we've got Elsha of the Infinite. This is one of Ian's OG commanders.
Yeah.
This is one of the going way back.
Yeah, I played my first SCG where they did high power commander tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
I had 2 decks on me, and it was Grand Arbiter Augustin the Fourth, and Elsha was the other one. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, one of those decks got me to top pods, and the other one got me a lot of draws.
And the one that got you to a lot of top pods was Grand Arbiter. How do you feel about Elsha? This is an interesting deck because I think that it has potential, but it's in a weird spot.
Yeah, I think this deck's cracked, to be honest. I think not that like, busted cracked, but like comparatively to I think the public perception of Elsha, I think it's actually very, very good. This might be another like I think we should just start calling them skill issue TM decks, like, which is just like it's the most shitty tongue-in-cheek way to like describe it, but it would be an abbreviation apart from saying high floor, low ceiling, right?
Yeah,
I think high floor, low ceiling deck, with for sure. I still think I have seen a lot of folks who are still getting into the format pick up Elsha and just clap on some fools. I just feel like it's not perceived as one of the better decks, and therefore it doesn't get the recognition for that. But like, I don't know. Every time I'm in a pod with an Elsha player who kind of knows what they're doing, they're one of the main people in the pod putting up threats, right? They have to fuck up to lose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is a good thing for a deck to have as a problem. Like if you have to make a mistake for it not to perform for you, that's good, right?
Yeah.
Like
I think that
Elsha
like
consistently does that. It's got a succinct combo. Every other couple sets, the Elsha combos get a little bit more card quality intensive, right? And they increase in card quality. It's one of like the best Jeskai decks ever like made, and like it inherently does the flash thing, which is one of the biggest things in the format right now is people are concerned about the flash thing not working, and this just does it right in the zone, right? So there's only so bad that aspect can be. I think it just takes patience from the pilot to not just go play all the things on my top of my deck and then tap out on their turn and pass, right? As opposed to you can just be like, I can do that, but on someone's end step. Ooh. Like
yeah. I think one of the things I don't love about it is the way it I like Elsha a lot. You almost had me bump it up to B tier, but I'm still a little reserved on it. And most of that is due to the fact that I want it to be a deck that's similar to Tivit in a way. But instead it often gets played like a pseudo turbo deck, which feels wrong.
Yes, agreed.
And I think, again, some of that, I don't think you should take Breach out of the deck. I think you should just re-examine some of the choices you have made in the deck because of the inclusion of Breach.
Like, for sure.
What'd you say?
You should definitely be playing Breach.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. Yeah. I think my point with bringing up Breach, though, is Breach will tell you play XYZ7, blah, 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 blah. Maybe just double check how many of those you actually need to be playing. And maybe that might be diluting your overall consistency some is kind of my feeling on it, because I think that is ultimately what I see is it splits the difference between the Elsha combo and the breach combo. And so it always ends up feeling like it can't do either one particularly well. And that's kind of how I feel about it. But I like Elsha a lot, and I think it has the potential to be one of the better decks if more people pick it up.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm gonna keep it at a C tier. I'm a little wary of it, but I'm willing to be wrong. So,
that's fair.
Which also, for the Yuriko commenters out there who are like, oh, I hope Yuriko starts winning a bunch of tournaments so Cal gets angry. It's like, if Yuriko starts winning a bunch of tournaments tomorrow, or any of the decks that I have in F tier, I will gladly take the L. Like,
yeah,
I'm not rooting against any of these decks.
yeah. This is our understanding of where things are at the current meta. Yeah.
I just every time I see that comment, I'm just like, I'm not rooting against anybody. Like I'm actively rooting for all of these decks. Like
well, right, but you're saying something negative, and therefore it's a personal attack against people.
Forgot about that. Yeah, my bad. Next commander on our list, we're moving up into 4 colors here. We've got Thrasios, Vial Smasher. This is our Sans White representative on the list. How do you feel about Thras Vial? We've talked a lot about Thras Vial on this channel over the past 2 years.
I just need the Thras Vial brewers to just pick something. It feels like okay, you know what it is? It's like, okay, this is as a bisexual person speaking. It's like when the meme of everyone just being like, pick a lane. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like that's what
this is bi erasure is what I'm
hearing. Yeah, Thras Vial is the bi erasure of CEDH. No, but like I just feel like, okay, and we have Devoted Druid Hazels now, which is like, hell yeah, reason to be playing Thryle, right? I need a reason to play this deck when I am playing a 4-color partner pile. I need a reason to play the 4-color partner pile and not a different 4-color partner pile, right? Because if you apples to apples, Timna Thrasios Timna, why play this one, right? There probably are reasons. I haven't heard them. That's my complaint with this deck, right? It's not that it's a bad deck. It's not that it's unplayable. I need a reason to play this color combination.
Yeah.
Because Sans White is fine. That's what I got. You cannot punch through Ranger Captains and Silences and things like that as effectively as these other decks that have them in response, right? White is very powerful right now, so I need a really good reason to not be playing it, It's still in my B tier because you're still playing one of the most powerful cards ever printed in the command zone, right? You're still playing Thrasios. You still have a number of different infinite mana combos.
You're still a 4-color Thrasios deck at the end of the day, right? Like, it can only be so bad.
You're still a 4-color deck with Breach, right? Like, there's only so bad that this can be. It's just also, I mean, thinking of the generalized contradiction of like, Sans White seems like a very turbo-y color combo, right? You've got Tinder Walls, you've got Breach combo, you've got a lot of explosivity with Grixis Core plus green, adding things like crop rotation and stuff like that, right? But the premier commander is also Thrasios, which is
grindy as fuck.
Yes, exactly. like just like crunch, grind, training grounds, flip over, then the Seaboard Muse, blah, 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 blah. And that's okay. But give me a reason to be doing it. If your answer is, I'm actually just playing Grixis Core, and then if I have to, I pivot onto Thrasios as a grind plan, sure, I can get behind that, right? Hence it being in the B tier. It's not unplayable, right? But once again, we end up with this problem of like, I need a reason to be in this. And then also, not even just comparing to other partner combinations, comparing to, I could also just add a color and play Kenrith instead if you're only using Thrasios as an outlet, right? So there's a lot of different answers as to
why no white in that scenario, right? Like, because then it's like, what is green giving you that white isn't? I think is the question.
Right. Exactly. So that is the sort of uphill battle that you fight against.
I mean, I think some of that answer is like, and this is something that I've seen people not really play around with, is I think it's like the 3 visits effects and the, Manamorphose effects and the stuff that like takes advantage of your like creatures in lands in green that you don't get in white, which I think is like a real thing. But like we don't see that in those Nas piles because like they basically just splash green for like crop rot or whatever, Veil of Summer. And I think some of what it is it's just very uninspired deck building is what it feels like. No, I will say this. I exclude Max from this discussion because
Sure.
every time I've seen Max play it, it's been very impressive.
But he's a Tivit main right now. So
that's true. That's true. So moving on to our next list here, Atraxa Grand Unifier. It's a big boy winner. What do you think about it? Esper winner plus a color. What do you think?
Yeah, looks fine. That's what I got. It looks totally fine right now. Like I have no problems with Atraxa. It's like, hey, do you want to, instead of playing Timna Thrasios and doing all the Thrasios shit, do you want to instead just have this big chunko who can sometimes win the game, and also maybe you like food chain more? Sure. Like 4 color good stuff pile versus 4 color good stuff pile. It really depends on what your top end wants to be, right? For me personally, I go, hell yeah, Atraxa sick as fuck. Like, boom, draw 10 cards. Let's go. Rock and roll, baby, right? That was probably awful for the Spotify listeners. I apologize. And then
YouTube listeners also, but they loved it. It was great.
The YouTube listeners. Well, yeah, they have us on their phone on the other side of the kitchen, and they're just like, I don't know, man. I don't know where I'm going with this, but the point is, Timna Thrasios is over here, Atraxa is over here. They're very good 4 color combinations right now. It's Esper Core plus a little bit of green to help ramp you into your big chunko in the command zone. That's it. Joe in the Crab Shack meta knows how to resolve an Atraxa and draw 10 cards.
Food chain's pretty easy to play.
you just lock in your advantage engines and you're fine.
Yep.
Realistically is the entire, that's the breaking point of the deck, is like, did I resolve my Smothering Tithe? If yes, potential to win game increase by percentage. If no, oh man, I gotta go look for my Rhystic Study when I get another tutor. Like
I think so I kind of look at like Tivit and Atraxa as like they're very similar decks. They play very similarly.
Oh, extremely.
Yes. And I think like if I had to choose which one, like if I had to put it like rank the A tiers, I think I put Tivit over Atraxa on the back of Tivit's win package is much cleaner than Atraxa's. Atraxa has like 1 to 2 cards more needed than Tivit does, which I feel like is like the thing that separates them to me.
Sure.
That being said, you could probably play either and do just well. I like both of them. They're both A-tier decks. I just prefer a little bit of a cleaner win con out of the command zone, but both of them are insanely efficient and good.
Yeah.
So I love it, and I love that we have Atraxa in cEDH. It makes my heart happy. Moving on. This might be our first entry into the highest of the tiers. Thrasios Timna, Ian. What's your how do you feel about the classic, the OG of the elite commander pairing?
Does anyone in the audience need me to really sort of talk about why this is a very good card? I don't think so, right? Like let's be honest here. Thrasios and Timna, we've talked about it on our month in reviews. The deck is insanely strong right now. I expect it to put up a number of results. It is one of the best 2 decks in the format. It's in my S tier.
Yep, same.
People who are very good at this game can consistently put up results with this deck, and I expect that pattern to continue ad nauseum. It's very powerful.
I don't know that it will be ad nauseum because I don't think it wants to play ad nauseum. But
you could. That's the crazy part about this.
I don't know why, but you could
right now. You can absolutely do that, right? You have access to very efficient win conditions. Hazel's Brewmaster put this deck I genuinely think Hazel's put this deck into the tier S, right? Like I think it was an A tier commander, and then Hazel's and obviously the bands like really
Yeah.
shot it up. This deck is very, very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I legitimately think that, yeah, I mean, that we could have a whole episode discussing the impact of certain printings, but yeah, Hazel's very good for this deck. It gave it a very efficient win condition, gave you resiliency on one of your main combos. You have so many instant speed wins that you can threaten.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, stop letting them get away with the silenced wins. But yeah, no, Thrasios Tim is very good right now. It's defining the format. Nothing really more to say.
Yeah. It's nature is healing. Uh, next commander on our list is Bjorna and Wog. This is the Sands Green, our first Sands Green commander. Here's the thing. I have a question mark on my on
Yeah.
our set review because I don't know how I feel about this commander pairing, and I need to be sold on how to feel about this commander pairing because
Sure.
how I feel about it right now is that like on paper it should be like really good, right? Because like it's just like a little bit. It's like if you want to play the Grixis core plus white, it's really good, low to the ground, stuff like that. But I always feel like it's not quite good enough. I don't know. Sell me on this. Sell me on why I should rate it the same way as you.
I think that there is only so bad Esper with Breach can be. And if I am playing a fast deck in the current format, I don't mind having white.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you apples to apples this with Rogsai, this is slower and less efficient than Rogsai, right? Pretty definitively. It's different though. It's basically the mid space between Blue Farm and Rogsai, I
Right.
think, is where you come up with Bjorna and Wernog.
It's
And
Bjorna.
oh, I'm very aware. I'm calling it Bjorna on purpose. So for Bjorna in this format, I think it's just in that middle space where it's not quite giving you card advantage, but it isn't not giving you card advantage, especially now the dockside is gone.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
from what I've heard from Bjorna pilots, legitimately everyone gives them the clue the first couple times, which I think is potentially a mistake, but they also want the card advantage, right? And it's like a clue, so it's like, what's the point? You know what I mean? Like it
Mm,
just you end up in that scenario. It's a very tempt with discovery, but more realistically likely to end up with Bjorna coming out on top.
right.
So that being said, I genuinely think that this deck is just enjoying a nice hybrid space between two very comfortable archetypes, and there's really only so bad it can be. I have it as B because I don't think there's enough reason right now for me to go, yeah, I want to be doing that instead, right?
Yeah.
A potential argument could be I want to be playing Blue Farm colors, but I really want things like Mox Amber to be online so that they're operating as early game sort of
Mm-hmm.
resiliency and stuff like that. And basically, if I want to be Blue Farm but worse at the grind and slightly faster, boom, that's the deck that I want, right? I
Yeah.
don't want to look at things like, like Brea or shit like that instead, right? For me, this is more an attractive option. And then also, technically speaking, it has Hullbreaker Horror as a potential alternate win con, right? Which is not that hard to get to if the game goes long, right? So there is a reality where you just sort of Hullbreaker loop as a way to break out of, some of these slower pods. So if you're playing it in a way where like there is a world where you play it kind of like what we talked about with Tavesh Crom, where you can play things like Curse
Mm-hmm.
Totem and stuff like that, and then play a couple board wipes, and then oh cool, here's this like late game resilient win con that
Right.
comes in and gives me legs in situations where you would lose something like a Rock Side. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. Uh, yeah. So B tier all
Yeah.
around. I will vote along your along party lines. Uh, next commander here, it is the one, the only Timna Crom. This is an F tier deck for sure.
Yeah, big poo poo garbage. No, Tim Necrom's back up in S tier. It took a hit from the format. I don't think it's as like I would argue pre-ban it was in the S plus category, right? With
Yeah.
like Rogsai, whereas like right now it just feels like a S tier commander in the sense of like it's just doing the best stuff.
Yep.
I still play in pods where the blue farm player does not have the right interaction at the right time, and we lose as a collective, and they didn't dominate the whole pod. If anything,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen Timna Thrasios players get there a little bit more consistently, but like an S minus is still an S in our category, right? Like
Yeah.
it's still very, very powerful. There are metas that I think are more susceptible to more proactive play, and I would expect blue farm to do better in those metas than Timna Thrasios.
Yep. No, I agree with that fully. I also have it here in S tier, and for a lot of the same reasons. I mean, it's 4-color pile. I do think the more I do think it's a little slightly worse than Thras Timna, and I think
Yeah.
that's almost entirely because of the fact. I mean, Chrome's just hard to cast these days, and
I legitimately think it's a coast thing, though. Like, I legitimately
yeah,
think us on the eastern side of the country are gonna like Timna Thrasios more, and if you go to the west side of the country, from at least my understanding, not Portland specifically, the PNW is very much East Coast coded,
yeah,
but anything lower West Coast or like
in the
Midwestern region,
California region.
yeah, especially is like you're gonna see a lot of the a lot more of the blue farms.
That's just those California liberals are off their rocker. Like they don't know what us in Middle America think.
Where was I just taken from?
Hi, welcome. This is Sculpty Wars.
Oh no. Okay, I hate this. Thank you. Where's the eject button? Can I?
Next commander on this list is Thrasios Bruce. It's the last of our 4-color commanders we have here. Thrasios Bruce is a deck that is interesting.
Damn, bro. Damn, bro.
It's good.
Nah, I hear you. I hear you. You did me dirty.
It's good. It is good. Listen. Advantage Thrasios is good.
You're a piece of shit. You're just a full fucking dookie. You're a full fucking turd wrapped up in a human. Just fucking shitting about. How dare you?
Always worth it. No, Thrasios Bruce is a good. It's Dawnwaker's always good. Does that make you feel better? Dawnwaker.
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
What if I called it Zerda? Zerda, Thrasios Zerda's, always good.
I can accept this.
What are your thoughts on Thras Bruce?
Yeah, it's one of those archetypes that I think is totally fine. Like I don't really have a lot bad about it to say. I don't have like, for me it is a archetype thing, right? I think the heavier on layered creature combos stuff means that in this current format it has the potential to do pretty well, right? Um and there's different ways you can take it and stuff like that. I do think it comes out to like a bit of the Kinnan problem where the archetype is solid. It's
Right.
very much like it's eating your vegetables deck. But the meta is definitely tough right now. Like not having black is still the problem that the deck always will face. You're really good at gaining a lot of card advantage. You're good at grinding, all that kind of stuff. But there's definitely things that can come up as issues for the list to face against.
Yeah.
And as a pilot, you just got to be ready for those. But at the same time, you get access to really explosive combos that layer, as I mentioned, pretty decently well with each other.
Yeah.
And the card quality keeps it pretty decently high too.
I think that it is like a deck that feels the impact of Bowmasters the most.
Yeah.
Like
It
really
really
feels
does.
that way.
Yeah, and you know what? I've played around it. I've beaten Bowmasters with this deck many times, right? It's still a pain in the dick, like it's just really awful.
Which is weird because you'd think like Timna Thrasios would also be that way, but it just Timna Thrasios.
Yeah, but they get to play it is the problem. That's
exactly
that they get to then hold up their Bowmasters to respond to the other Bowmasters, and don't worry, that play pattern's not toxic at all. Like. Jesus Christ. All right. Anyways.
Yeah, Thras Bruce is a solid B. I think that Advantage Bruce is really good.
You're such a peepee. Like,
this is one of my favorite things to do. It really is. It's always funny.
The funny part is there's definitely people in the audience out there who have no idea why I'm so mad at you for this.
This is some deep lore. Lore.
Yeah.
All right, we're back. We're into our final three our last 3 commanders. They're all 5-color commanders. Kenrith, how do you feel about it?
Kenrith Sod. I have it as a B just because we are referring to the Crab Shack meta. I think Kenrith
Mm-hmm.
is an A tier deck. I just think you can definitely see the pilots who are comfortable with the archetype and know where they specifically want to end on the Kenrith like spectrum of am I Hermit Druid, am I Adnaz, am I mid range, am I blah, 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 blah. Wherever you want to be on there. There are pilots who can confidently lock in their spot on
Mm-hmm.
the spectrum and go, okay, this is why I excel at doing this thing. And if they do that and they do that well, they succeed and it's great.
Yeah.
Problem is, it's so confusing. You have so many options available to you, right? And I've seen very competent, experienced Kenrith pilots who just go down one of the 30 avenues that isn't going to win them the game when turns out there were like 2, you know?
Yeah.
Like it is literally a deck that has, I mean, if you play
And
Kenrith
the
because
issue is
want
you
the
won't know
most,
you turned down the wrong road until like 4 or
till
5
you
turns later.
wrapped it on up. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I completely agree, right? Like, and there are times where I'm like, yeah, no, I would let myself exile this tutor because there's an oppo on the field and instead pump that mana into 1/1 counters on Kenrith so I can put a beatdown clock
Right.
on, right? I would let a tutor get exiled, once again, for context, for like counters being put on my Kenrith. That's the kind of decisions you have to make sometimes with the deck. And if you are sort of trying to maximize value, that can kind of get lost at times. You know what I
Right.
mean? So that's the sort of issues that I think you can run into with Kenrith, where it's like there's so many decision trees. It's very powerful. It's very potentially viable in a lot of different aspects. It needs a direction, you know?
Yeah. I think that aspect puts it at a C, but I think the commander power, like the inherent power of it being like an A, averages it out to a B. Is kind of
Sure.
how I feel about it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can hear the pitch that you
Yeah.
are putting down, even though I may not agree with it.
Next commander here, we've got Najeela the Blade Blossom. Najeela is a commander I'm going to start here on this one because
Yeah.
I have it here at a C tier.
Yeah.
And part of that, and which is shocking because I'm actually usually
You're a
pretty
big
high on
Najeela fan.
Najeela.
Yeah, like that's the craziest part about this for sure.
I think my issue is with it right now is it has trouble in the Bowmaster's world. It doesn't feel like it has much of an identity these days, is
Okay.
kind of how I feel about Najeela. Is it feels like it's the worst combination of turbo in mid-range and commander combo, and it just doesn't have an identity. And I think that is why I don't like it that much right now. I think that it should be an A, but I think that it is brought down to a C because it's played like a bad turbo deck a lot of times. And, or it will have like, even versions that I've built of it where it like has creature combos in it, then your card quality is really bad and your commander's like a combo piece. So like you don't get to play the advantage engines. And like, I really just think that a lot of it has become so inbred in like the Najeela teachings that like the creativity is just gone. And
Sure. I can get behind that
I
actually.
think
Yeah.
that the deck in the commander should be better, but I ultimately think that the lack of an identity makes it like, it doesn't have the identity that Sisay has. It doesn't have the flexibility that Kenrith has.
Yeah.
So it's like, why am I playing it?
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of the issue I have with it right now. I ultimately will not put it any lower than this because again, it can just naturally win on its own, but which is strong, but I just I can't think of a reason to play it, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that's the struggle with it.
Right. My experience with Najeela often ends in this critical nexus of like you position yourself well. You have a good board state. There's maybe even someone who kind of locks a couple people out of the game, and you're like, "Fuck yeah, combat beats." And then everyone starts going, "Aw, shit, Najeela's coming up. It's gonna do the thing. We got to get rid of it, right?" and there are like 3 people all with a piece of targeted removal in their
Mm-hmm.
hand, basically like peacocking about, oh no, how big of a problem Najeela is. And then Najeela gets BTFO'd, and then you as the pilot go, oh wow, the thing I said was going to happen happened. And then everyone goes, oh, but good job, we saved the table, everybody, high fives all around. You go to the next person in turn order, and they go, okay, thank you for using all of that targeted removal so that I personally did not have to use my interaction. Here is a win condition. Everyone goes,
Right.
how could we have seen this coming? It's a play pattern I've seen a lot with Najeela.
Yeah.
Now, is that how it works every time? Absolutely fucking not. We have cool cards now, like Gornog, which I do think fundamentally changes how Najeela works. I've seen the lists that have been doing well with Najeela. Turns out they're all running Gornog because it's like this full pivot plan where you're like, cool, in 3 turns you're dead
Right.
from a base state. From a
Right.
base state in 3 turns they're dead. That's crazy, right?
Yeah. I mean,
So
that's a huge acceleration.
yeah, yeah, and I think you and I have talked about this a little bit in the past. We talked about like there's still work that needs to be done with the Najeela. It's just it's clunky right now, and
I
not
mean,
like this is a deck,
I'm
right?
just I've said this a lot. No bad cards is a fundamentally bad way of playing that deck. It misses what makes the the other no bad cards lists good, because you can do that build in Timna Crom, right? Because you
Sure,
have
sure.
the commander, your commanders are card advantage, and
They
we
support
talked about this,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Thrasios Timna can be a no bad cards deck, because guess what? Uh you have 2 advantage outlets in your command zone,
Yep.
and one that's a mana outlet. So like you get to just play a lot of good cards. When you don't play anything to help your game plan in advantage in Najeela, you're just playing a worse version of a different 5-color deck. Just play the other 5-color deck. You don't need Najeela to turn on. I don't even know what it turns on, right? Like in theory, I think it was fine during the ROG is the only thing meta, right? Because you had like a way of like pivoting if a game got weird and fucky. But then Bowmasters got printed, and I just like I just I don't know. I don't have a lot of good reasons to play. I just don't feel like it has an identity. And I think that is my biggest issue with it, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, I fully agree with you. I just I
I think I don't know if I'm gonna go as far as like it doesn't have an identity or like NBC is strictly bad right now, but like I do think NBC is a very particular type of Najeela that needs to be played in the right moments. That should be considered a meta attack, a
yeah.
parasitic meta attack deck, right? And I don't think it is perceived that way as much as I would argue it potentially should be, right?
I that's a much more fair way of describing that, because it really is good in more turbo environments.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um
And so like with all of that, right? I think that there are ways to build the deck that are going to yield high potential. It's just recognizing, and this is something that I could I mean, this is actually 90% of what I talk about when I do coaching is points of failure, right?
mhm.
Where does your strategy go wrong? What can your opponents have that takes apart your strategy, right? And most Najeela decks I see are all focused on upside and have zero consideration, not zero, that's probably kind of rude,
Very
have
little.
minimal consideration for points of failure.
Yeah.
It's very consistent across the board. There's very little where does this go wrong. It's very much a case of, well, if I do this, this is upside, and then with this thing, it's also
It's like
more
the
upside.
opposite of Yuriko, right? Where like
Mhm.
Yuriko has like all of these contingency plans, right? And
Yes.
Najeela is just like, nothing is going to go wrong. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Yes. That's genuinely how I feel about it too. Yeah.
Our final commander we have here is Sisay Weatherlight Captain. God, I'm really going to be shocked to find out where Ian has Sisay. This is like a Z tier deck, right?
Yeah. Totally amazing. No. I am struggling today with the ranking on
Oh,
Sisay
okay.
because I think this card I mean deck is like insanely good, right? Like
Right.
I just yeah, in general. I think it's a very, 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 very powerful archetype, right? And
But
I can't put it on S tier
yeah.
right now because the bans made it so that you have to work harder for this deck than you did pre-ban.
Mhm.
But that's my debate. It's not between how high I should rank this card. It's the reasons I can't call it an S tier deck.
Right.
So that should tell you the positives that I have to say about Sisay in the
Right.
current metagame. I think Sisay has never been more lucky to have people like Teleria East or
Yeah.
Malcolm who are not afraid. I mean, especially Malcolm, who are like not afraid to throw all the paint at the wall, right?
Right.
Because like I went on record talking about this a little while ago, where like the Gideon inclusion, the Planeswalker deck
We
Gideon,
talked about that,
yeah,
like, what was it, on our power rankings episode?
yeah,
That
where I'm like,
Gideon inclusion
yeah,
is inspired. That
it's
is
inspired, right? And
it
it's stuff
is
like that that
insane.
like you need for Sisay. This is exactly one of those decks where you are not afraid to play a card that they literally printed so that it would be not playable in standard. That is
Right.
literally how they printed that card. Because if it was playable in standard, those learner decks would be chase decks. That is
Right.
why they printed those decks. So it was literally printed to not, pardon me, not have long-term value in it. And yet it is playable in Sisay. And this goes back to that conversation we had last week about why decks like this succeed when they stop trying to make decks that are not good stuff decks,
Right.
right?
Yeah, I mean, it is such a testament to, like, the creativity of
Yep.
players,
Yes.
and it's so funny because I feel like it's, like, the opposite of, like, what we were just talking about with Najeela, right? Where I feel like it's,
Yeah.
like, not very creative, and it's just, like, very, you know, obvious
Yeah.
almost in some degree, and that's not, like, hating on any of those builds or anything like that. It just is, like, very, like, yeah, those are good cards. And Sisay is an example of, I have it in A tier. And I think Sisay is such an example of, we talked about this a little bit with like Rogthras, right? Where like the stuff that like Sam Black is doing with it is just like I would have never thought about that in a million years.
Yeah.
And I feel that way with like a lot of Sisay decks where I just like look at it. I'm like, I think you could have put 100 Miis or infinite Miis in infinite universes would have never come up with that, right?
Hmm.
It's just like it is insane. Some of the stuff that Sisay pilots come up with, it is just that good and flexible as a commander.
Hmm.
Do you remember? I say this every time we talk about Sisay, but it's just, you guys remember when Opposition Ninja got printed and we threw what was it? Rebel did the funeral for Sisay, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I just I will never get over how Sisay just kept moving. You know what I
This is
mean? It
a
just
yeah. Okay. Sure. Like yeah.
hold my
That is.
beer.
Oh, that was inconvenient. All right. Anyways, like yeah. Yeah.
Well, that is the definitive, the official, the only CEDH tier list that matters. It was honestly fun to do this
Yeah. I had a
instead
good
of
time.
like a power rankings this year, because like last year we did power rankings. I liked that, but I really miss being able to go through and just like look at these outside of just performance only.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, what are your kind of final thoughts as we head into the new year? We've got like, I
Hmm.
think this will be our last episode before 2025. So,
Hubba hubba. Yeah.
what are your
So
thoughts?
I definitely have seen there's like a lot of like dialogue right now about, and I don't want to call it discourse, that sounds maybe like too dismissive, right? But like there's a lot of dialogue about like what the format looks like.
Conversation.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff. I think CEDH is in a fantastic spot, if I'm being honest. I know there are people who think it's a very advantage engine heavy, which it is, right? But it's like when people talk about Pokemon and they say, "Oh, well, the best Pokemon teams all have the same Pokemon on them," and not realizing that there are like different movesets, different ways to build each individual
Mhm.
Pokemon, different it's so interesting and unique when you take the details out, and not to mention the fact that this is the most diverse competitive metagame there is.
Yeah.
Like, I think period in Magic, like by a lot, by a really considerable amount. And the fact that you can take a deck like fucking Plagon, or you can take a deck like Yuriko and like put them at the same tables as decks like Blue Farm, and it's not just like a cool, I've cleaned up the match and I'm gonna move on. But like you
Right.
have to respect each and every one of these decks, especially at the hands of a competent pilot,
Yeah.
right? So I think cEDH is in a fantastic spot. We are not in a fucking 3.5 deck format anymore. Not that I think it was maybe that extreme, but it definitely started to feel a little like stale towards the pre-ban world, right? So like I'm very happy with where cEDH is right now. If you're struggling with Rhystic Studies and stuff like that, maybe it's because you're trying to out mid-range and out advantage decks that are better at doing that game plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look for ways to attack the format in unique angles, right? Like, I mean, I literally played Yennet at the last weekend, which is a deck that nobody's even talked about, right? And I won by resolving Peer into the Abyss, a card that
Mm-hmm.
everyone's laughed out of the room. In all 3 of the matches that I won during that tournament were resolved Peer into the Abysses, right?
Yeah.
No, it took work to get there. I had to position myself appropriately. Several of them I had silences for, right? But it did happen. And that's how we did it, right? And so there's so much space in this meta. Yes, blue is very good right now. Yes, flash win cons are important. And yes,
Blue
card
has always
advantage.
been good though,
Well, yeah,
right?
I know,
Like,
I know. But like card advantage engines are very important right now. But by far, diversity in this metagame is so extensive.
yeah.
And I don't know. I like I think I have so many good things to say about where CEDH is right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of good, organizing over here in the East Coast, especially with tournaments and things like that. And people are like putting stuff up, multiple times a week and things like that. So I'm very optimistic about where CEDH is at the current
Yeah,
moment.
me too.
The meta is really exciting. There's so much creativity allowed. And if you want to just like do the same thing, copy and paste and like put up wins, then like, yeah, the meta is not going to feel that exciting to you. But if you're willing to innovate, try and do new stuff, explore and like push the boundaries of what's possible, this is the perfect time to do that.
cEDH is
Yeah.
not a grinders format; it is a brewers format.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's
And I
how
think
I
that's
will always feel about that.
yeah, no, I think that's a really good way to describe it. And I think um it's not saying that there's not space for them, but like brewers will thrive in
Yep.
cEDH. Grinders will be able to grind, but they will not feel like they're thriving as much, right?
Right.
Even people who are playing the S tier decks in the format, you are seeing people who are doing different stuff with those decks, who are attacking on axes that people aren't ready for. They are succeeding and thriving. It's one of the reasons that I didn't like Blue Farm being the top deck for a long time, because you barely had any wiggle room with that deck comparatively to something like Timna Thrasios, which once again, I've seen 40 to 50 card differences
Yeah.
between Timna Thras builds, right? Like maybe 30 to 40, but still, that's like a really a lot of cards, right? So
Yeah. Oh, and I mean that's the thing. Like when you mentioned the thing where it's like, oh well, they all play the same cards. It's like, but they don't.
yeah,
And they might play the same 70 cards, but
yeah,
those 30, 20, 15
yeah,
card differences are
a lot.
huge.
Yeah,
Like those are entire deck differences, right?
agreed.
And I think that like that is one of the things where this format is just so different than any other format out there. It offers brewing and it encourages brewing and it rewards brewing.
Yeah,
And not that it doesn't, and part of why I say it's not a grinders format is because just by the law of averages, you have to be an exceptional player to do better than 25% on a win rate, right? And that is like asking a lot still. And so I think that like if you are willing to be creative and you want to get creative in this format, it's going to treat you really well. And if you just want to play one deck, I mean, I just play one deck and I love it. But I think the format's at a great spot. This is the best I felt about it. I feel about it completely different than I did before the ban. Before the ban, I was feeling like I was ready to check out. um,
yeah,
but now I feel great about the format. Format feels awesome. So,
yeah, yeah.
with that being said, if people want some coaching on how to brew and want some help with their brews and their excursions into that, where can people find you?
Yeah, everybody. You can find me comedianmtg@gmail.com or in the link tree that Callahan is so nice to link below. And oh, my favorite sausage is here. Hi, Athena. Um, yeah, if you're curious in taking that next step up for your cEDH gaming, we've got a lot of stuff. I pitched my resume a little bit last time. I'll do it again here. More diverse wins with more archetypes than any other cEDH grinder by far. I've been doing this also probably longer than most of the grinders in this format,
Mhm.
and as far as like consistently performing, but one of the top players for the past 3 years, arguably the top winning player in several of those years, right? So very cool stuff. Happy to help you all take your next steps. I'm also offering a Christmas sale right now. So if you gift a session to another person, that will be $10 off, or $15 off. That's right. What that normally would be. So if you gift somebody a session, that's $15 off, and then they could also gift it back to you. So that's nice. Yay! Happy holidays. Help your friends to take that step up with their gaming as well. So. And also I've been, I know I mentioned this like earlier in the year, I've been doing, basically price discounts for people who come back, because I want to encourage folks to continue to grow and work as a team and stuff like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you all for people who have signed up already. For those who watch this show, remember Patreon helps out, mostly Cal, but helps out keep things going on this show, because this is a lot of fun and I enjoy doing this with my friend every week, and it helps keep that very cute dog on the camera fed. So all that stuff helps a
Yeah.
ton.
See, sometimes you just like to go into the closet and find the food yourself. She's like, you didn't feed me fast enough.
Oh yeah, the cats have been breaking into our food basically every day.
We found this dingus drinking water out of the toilet, which we had to
Well,
stop.
that's pretty classic dog, I think, right?
That's pretty classic dog, but she usually doesn't do that. And she just wandered in there, and we were like, "What are you doing?" And it was just like, "Okay, you can just ask for water." If you want to support us, like he said, on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/the Mind Sculptors. Help us out a lot over there. If you want to just support the channel, you can, without any sort of money, we greatly appreciate that with a like and comment here on YouTube, as well as, if you subscribe here on YouTube, it's free. It costs you nothing. As well as if you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave a comment or a review. That helps us out greatly. We deeply appreciate that. With that being said, thank you all for joining us for the year 2025. We will see you on the other side of the new year. And I don't know what we'll be doing, but I'm assuming cEDH Awards are around the corner. So,
Oh yeah.
With that being said, I'm Cal.
I'm Ian.
We'll see you next time. Stay sculpty, everybody.
Bye.